truth and the absolute laws of nature for guiding me, protecting me, and giving me the strength to endure the imperfect. I shall attack with vigor, making progressive moves. A divine mind knows, a divine mind shows. All things work in divine order. All things work in divine order. All things work in divine order. Peace and power. Salute, salute, salute. Yeah, it's a hat night. I can't even front. I am literally drained. Literally, it's taken everything for me to go on tonight. Literally, uh, but I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. Big four, what up? Brown girl. T, what up? Literally draining and exhausting week. And this thing with this phone here didn't help at all. E, what up? So if I start taking little nibbles off of this chocolate, just to give me a little boost, definitely have a little, whatever they call that, sun drop, whatever the hell that is. Aruba, salute. It's not the rest. It's not the rest. I'm telling you, I could only imagine what Fidel, Che, Winnie, other people had to go through in order to reach our people. It's just, ignorance and it's at an all-time high, man. And the response that you get in this work, I always tell you, if you're coming into this space, always be mindful that the rewards are minimal. This way, you never grow to resent the people because it's not about you. It is about the mission. It is about the task. It is about struggle to struggle. That's it. There's no long, drawn out explanations. We have to do because we must. That's it. That's it. So, y'all know what book it is. And, let's be encouraged. Let's love ourselves. Let's be open to the information. Let us love on each other. Let us encourage each other. Let us question each other. Right? Let us build. Hey, Kelly Mills. Kelly be neglecting me, y'all. Word up. She sure do. She sure do. Big foe, what up? Where you been? Yeah. And a lot has been said this week. I know a lot of you were waiting for us to go on last night and tonight. We'll get it right. Because definitely I'm going to tear. Y'all not going to want to miss it. Just put it that way. I'm not going to want to miss it. And I know you see me nibbling because I want a little kick. You know, I definitely don't eat in front of you like that, but I need it. Extra dark, 85% dark chocolate. Mm. Philly C, salute. Thank you, Brown Girl, for keeping the book in the chat, the link in the chat. The link for the Cash App is there. No, I don't know if the link is there, but the Cash App is definitely there. Remember, we encourage all who want to donate, please. But again, Super Chat is not for us. Super Chat is for YouTube. That's how they eat. Quiet as a cat. I see people getting thousands in the Super Chat and 50s, hundreds. All they doing is feeding YouTube. That's it. You know? So be mindful of it, you know? And since I'm not on Doggy Diamonds and Outspoken, you know, I have to, you know, do some adjusting to this sound because I'm not with it tonight. Excuse me. I'm going through that shit tonight. Everybody ready? No, I am. I know I am. All right? Concerning violence. And see, I told y'all this is, right? This is still the first chapter. Little pages. Because I'm telling you, this book we nicknamed The Map. Because you have to go through it extensively and really dig in. Because it's not just a pick up, read, run through. No. You have to dissect it. Take your time with it. You know? You have to love it. You dig? I see y'all, Philly. I see you, Philly. I see you. All right. Page 63, concerning violence. All right. Before negotiations have been set afoot, the majority of nationalist parties confine themselves, for the most part, to explaining and excusing this savagery. Now, when we left, we was talking about how the natives was giving it up, right? So, as always, if you don't understand something, reread it, rewatch previous builds until it sinks in. You dig? Salute, Todd. Peace, peace. So, when we can recall, these is the starts, the beginnings, right, of violent actions with the natives, right? And the nationalist parties, right? Because again, when you're in the mix of that, you have military wings, you have political wings, you have the intelligentsia, you have all these different things that go on, right? In the mix or in the phenomena, which is colonize versus colonizer. All that is in the mix. So these things have to manifest themselves. So now you have people who are nationalists speaking for the masses, which may not always be a truthful representation of what those who have been the most oppressed, you know, right? So they are excusing this savagery. They do not assert that the people have to use physical force, and it sometimes even happens that they go so far as to condemn in private the spectacular deeds which are declared to be hateful by the press and public opinion in the mother country. So basically, they're saying the coons, right? These people who, you know, the Joy Reids, the people who you see, right, that speak so eloquently against the violence in the hoods, in the wards, in the projects, right? These are the people who are getting a bag to speak as a representation of people because they share this, not necessarily because they share this. Right? So these are the coons, the turncoats, you know, those who, you know, the colonizers put up in high visibility to do two things. To, right, dishearten us, dishearten the people by showing somebody who appears to be your brethren speaking down against you and saying they don't want you. That's disheartening. That's disheartening. Because that's what happens when I get like trolled. You know, and people make ignorant comments. You trying to figure out, well, damn, who raised you? And if it wasn't who raised you, who sent you? Because if anybody should understand our plight, it should be our own. However, I always tell you, our own here is not always our own. All right? Love and humanity, Karim. You dig? So again, this is what we're referring to. These are the coons. Big Moss, salute. All right? Again, let me repeat. They do not assert that the people have to use physical force, and it sometimes even happens that they go so far as to condemn in private the spectacular deeds which are declared to be hateful by the press and public opinion in the mother country. Now, do you recall during the George Floyd protest when they took over that precinct in Washington State? Took over an entire precinct. Was it Washington State or was it Portland? Was it Oregon? I believe it was Washington because I think it was Seattle. That was magnificent. That was what they talk about. Spectacular deeds. We're on page 63. That was spectacular. Like, can you actually, or did you actually witness that? Now, how did that precinct fall? Entire precinct. Now, this is in 2020, 2021. Precincts don't just fall to people power. Here. This wasn't a small island nation. This wasn't overseas where their policing may not be as sophisticated. This was here. And people kind of, even to this day, don't recognize it. or act like that wasn't a spectacular deed. They caught it, they took it, and held it for a good while. But you can tell from that point that the political education in real time wasn't going on, because what was the outcome? If the outcome was just to do that, then they're so far away from what should be their actual goals that, again, it amounted to nothing, because it wasn't an educational piece that should have been the catalyst for more, for precincts to be falling all over the country, just falling. That's when you know you have leaders who are truly engaged and knowledgeable of what it takes. We have yet to see that. We don't see that, you know? The legitimate excuse for this ultra-conservative policy is to desire to see things in an objective light. But this traditional attitude of the native intellectual and of the leaders of the nationalist parties is not, in reality, in the least objective. For in fact, they are not at all convinced that this impatient violence of the masses is the most effective means of defending their own interests. Moreover, there are some individuals who are convinced of the ineffectiveness of violent methods. For them, there is no doubt about it. Every attempt to break colonial oppression by force is a hopeless effort, an attempt at suicide, because in the innermost recesses of their brains, the settlers' tanks and airplanes occupy a huge place. When they are told action must be taken, they see bombs raining down on them, armored cars coming at them on every path, machine gunning, and police action. And they sit quiet, right? These new age activists, right? The ones that Sharpton raised up, scared to death. Or maybe not. Maybe not be just ignorant of what true people's struggle look like. All right? They are beaten from the start. They are beaten from the start. There is no need to demonstrate their incapacity to triumph by violent methods. They take it for granted in their everyday life and in their political maneuvers. They have remained in the same childish position as Engels took up in his famous polemic with that monument of puerility, Monsieur Doring. And we quote, "In the same way that Robinson Crusoe was able to obtain a sword, we can just as well suppose that man Friday might appear one fine morning with a loaded revolver in his hand, and from then on the whole relationship of violence is reversed. Man Friday gives the orders, and Crusoe is obliged to work. Thus the revolver triumphs over the sword, and even the most childish believer in axioms will doubtless form the conclusion that violence is not a simple act of will, but needs for its realization certain very concrete preliminary conditions. And in particular, the implements of violence and the more highly developed of these implements will carry the day against primitive ones. Moreover, the very fact of the ability to produce such weapons signifies that the producer of highly developed weapons in everyday speech, the arms manufacturer, triumphs over the producer of primitive weapons. To put it briefly, the triumph of violence depends upon the production of armaments. And this, in its turn, depends on production in general, and thus on economic strength, on the economy of the state, and in the last resort, on the material means that which violence commands. So, in that, it is simply saying it ain't no fun when the rabbit got the gun. You dig? So these very same tactics, strategies, brute force, cross burnings, and the such went on for years and years and years because there was limited organized fight back. The minute it was organized fight back, things shifted. Things totally shifted once we heard Black Power, once we saw Black Power, the image of the leather jackets and the berets. Excuse me. It always shifts. Violence is the universal language. No one has a monopoly on it. No one has a monopoly on violence. Anybody can get it. Anybody can dish it. What makes it effective is the other institutions that come and protect those who are the most violent. So once you have those who are willing and able to commit audacious acts of violence in order to ensure, and my question is always, why haven't you been taught that? Why haven't you been taught that? That's all. Why you haven't been taught that? With transparency, the effectiveness of how we can get down and really get down. That's all right? In fact, the leaders of reform have nothing else to say than, quote unquote, with what are you going to fight the settlers? With your knives, your shotguns? It is true that weapons are important when violence comes to play, since all finally depends on the distribution of these implements. But it so happens that the liberation of colonial countries throws new light on the subject. For example, we have seen that during the Spanish campaign, which was a very genuine colonial war, Napoleon, in spite of an army which reached in the offensives of the spring of 1810, the huge figure of 400,000 men was forced to retreat. Yet, the French army made the whole of Europe tremble by its weapons of war. by the bravery of its soldiers and by the military genius of its leaders. Face to face with the enormous potentials of the Napoleonic troops, the Spaniards, inspired by an unshakable national ardor, rediscovered the famous methods of guerrilla warfare, which 25 years before the American militia had tried out on the English forces. But the natives' guerrilla warfare would be of no value as opposed to other means of violence if it did not form a new element in the worldwide process of competition between trusts and monopolies. You see, so this is why you study, you research war. All the answers to anything is there when you study war. Because we have been at war with each other for a long, long time. Long time. So when you study war, when you study the finances of war, when you study the manufacturing of war, the elements of war, the casualties of war, you study all. You become way knowledgeable. Because that is what we are. That is what we became. It's just what it is. You study war, you study. All right? In the early days of colonization, a single column could occupy immense stretches of country. The Congo, Nigeria, the Ivory Coast, and so on. Today, however, the colonized country's national struggle crops up in a completely new international situation. Capitalism in its early days saw in the colonies a source of raw materials which, once turned into manufactured goods, could be distributed on the European market. After a phase of accumulation of capital, capitalism has today come to modify its conception of the profit-earning capacity of a commercial enterprise. The colonies have become a market. The colonial population is a customer who is ready to buy goods. Consequently, if the garrison has to be perpetually reinforced, right? If buying and selling slackens off, that is to say, if manufactured and finished goods can no longer be exported, there is clear proof that the solution of military force must be set aside. So, you're saying you can't make money. Capitalism can't do anything in the mix of heavy war. Everything is casualties. Everything is disturbed. Everything is ducking or advancing or retreating. There's no money in that. Right? A blind domination founded on slavery is not economically speaking worthwhile for the bourgeoisie of the mother country. The monopolistic group within this bourgeoisie does not support a government whose policy is solely that of the sword. what the factory owners and finance magnates of the mother country expect from their government is not that it should decimate the colonial peoples, but that it should safeguard, with the help of economic conventions, their own legitimate interests. Which means you can't kill everybody. You can't kill consumers. You can't kill. What are we doing here? And they flip it. So capitalism has a different face. There's a totally different appearance with it. Because now it is slick. It is no longer the torch of the cross on the property, on the porch, in front of the black person's house. Instead of that, they come with the job contract that says you work 80 hours a week and we'll pay you, $250 at the end of the week. That's the new cross burning. That's the new lynching. Instead of being an immediate death, it's a slow death, a 25-year, 30-year death until the pension kicks in or something. This is what they have mastered. This is what they've mastered. How to fight without fighting. How to colonize without leaving their own space. Crazy. Crazy. And when you think of it, you see yourself in it. How deep? How deep are you in it? Yeah, and people still have to work as retirees, yes. Because again, it changed the goalposts. Okay. They shifted the goalposts, made it longer, restructured the rules. So now people are 60, 65, even 70. A little piece of a pension or a little piece of disability or, a little piece of something and going back to work. Because it's not enough. Because it's not enough. Come on, y'all. That's where we at with it. All right? That's where we at with it. And it gets crazy. It gets crazy. Thus, there exists a sort of detached complicity between capitalism and the violent forces which blaze up in colonial territory. What is more, the native is not alone against the oppressor. For indeed, there is also the political and diplomatic support of progressive countries and peoples, but above all, there is competition. That pitiless war which financial groups wage upon each other. Excuse me. A Berlin conference was able to tear Africa into shreds and divide her up between 3 or 4 imperial flags. At the moment, the important thing is not whether such and such a region in Africa is under French or Belgian sovereignty, but rather that the economic zones are respected Today, wars of repression are no longer waged against rebel sultans. Everything is more elegant, less bloodthirsty. The liquidation of the Castro regime will be quite peaceful. They do all they can to strangle Guinea, and they eliminate, right, Mossadegh. Thus, the nationalist leader who is frightened of violence is wrong if he imagines that colonialism is going to massacre all of us. The military will, of course, go on playing with tin soldiers, which date from the time of the conquest, but higher finance will soon bring the truth home to them. This is why reasonable nationalist political parties are asked to set out their claims as clearly as possible and to seek, with their colonialist opposite numbers, calmly and without passion, for a solution which will take the interests of both parties into consideration. We see that if this nationalist reformist tendency, which often takes the form of a kind of caricature of trade unionism, decides to take action, it will only do so in a highly peaceful fashion, though stoppages of work, through stoppages of work in the few industries which have been set up in the towns, mass demonstrations to cheer the leaders, and the boycotting of buses or of imported commodities. All these forms of action serve at one and the same time to bring pressure to bear on the forces of colonialism and to allow the people to work off their energy. This practice of therapy by hibernation, this sleep cure used on the people, may sometimes be successful. Thus, out of the conference, around the green baize table, comes the political selectiveness which enables Monsieur Mabia, the president of the Republic of Gabon, to state in all seriousness on his arrival in Paris for an official visit, Gabon is independent. But between Gabon and France, nothing has changed. Everything goes on as before. In fact, the only change is that Monsieur Mobia is president of the Gabonese Republic and that he is received by the president of the French Republic. You see that, right? So when they say, I'm going to the table with such and such politician, and he has such and such business on it, you see how they say that? No, but, I go to the table, I can sit with them, Because, of course, his position gains. His position, there's a change. But in the communities, they're still treated very much like slaves, brutalized, not educated. Nothing changed. But for them to be able to say, yeah, I represent them, let me come in here. Shit is wild. Very, very wild. All right? The colonialist bourgeoisie is helped in its work of calming down the natives by the inevitable religion. Mm-mm-mm. How do you calm the natives down? Spook them. All those saints who have turned the other cheek, who have forgiven trespasses against them, and who have been spat on and insulted without shrinking, are studied and held up as examples. Yeah, follow the good niggas. Follow the good niggas. I'm saying it's right here. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Boy, holla if you hear me. Holla if you hear me. Huh? Huh? On the other hand, the elite of the colonial countries, those slaves set free, when at the head of the movement, inevitably end up by producing an ersatz conflict, right? They use their brothers' slavery to shame the slave drivers or to provide an ideological policy of quaint humanitarianism for their oppressors' financial competitors. What that sound like? What that sound like? When hip hop took over as the number one genre of the planet over rock and roll. Excuse me, but yeah, who controlled hip hop and the purses attached to it? Salute, Ronald, salute. The truth is that they never make any real appeal to the aforesaid slaves. They never mobilize them in concrete terms. On the contrary, at the decisive moment, that is to say, from their point of view, the moment of indecision, they brandish the danger, right, of a mass mobilization as the crucial weapon which would bring about, as if by magic, the end of the colonial regime. So you see how they work? Double agents, foul ass shit. This is what they do. This shit. Obviously, there are to be found at the core of the political parties and among their leaders certain revolutionaries who deliberately turned their backs upon the farce of national independence. But very quickly, their questionings, their energy, and their anger obstruct the party machine, and these elements are gradually isolated and then quite simply brushed aside. At this moment, as if there existed a dialect communicants, the colonialist police will fall upon them with no security in the towns, avoided by the militants of their former party and rejected by its leaders. These undesirable firebrands will be stranded in county districts. Then it is that they will realize, bewildered, that the peasant masses catch on to what they have to say immediately, right? And without delay, ask them the question to which they have not yet prepared the answer. When do we start? This meeting of revolutionaries coming from the towns and country dwellers will be dealt with later on. For the moment, we must go back to the political parties in order to show the nature of their action, which is all the same progressive. In their speeches, the political leaders give a name to the nation. In this way, the natives' demands are given shape. Again, I always say, rename yourself, manifest that name into something. All right? Manifest it into something. That's where we at with it. You cannot continue to live by the names and the labels that the oppressive class gives you or has given to you. You have to get away from that almost immediately. Almost immediately. That's why I always question when people use the word sovereignty as if that has true meaning. Has no meaning. You're allowing the euro to give meaning to who you are by calling yourself terms that they invented, that they said, this is what this means. No, I'm not coming to you asking for change and asking to be acknowledged. No, I'm telling you that. I'm taking me back. You dig? What up, Kevin Mack? What up? We about to close. It's getting real thick. I'm trying to space it because I know what's getting ready to happen in this. You dig? I know what's coming through. And I have to make an attempt to get on IG and see if that app is working. And then try Zoom so I can get on with the comrade as hopefully as early as tomorrow. You know? So yeah, I want y'all to hold that. Hold that right there. It's very brief. Go back over it real quick. Because this concerning violence chapter is heavy. It's heavy. It's heavy. And as you're watching different people on gun ranges, you know what I'm saying, on YouTube and TikTok and all that, be mindful of what's really at play. All right? Hey, Calvin. So I'm going to go see if I could, if my IG is up and running. I know T was hitting me. And I was also trying to get voice, voice message in DMs, you know, and it wouldn't let me do it. As soon as I pressed that microphone and say something, boom, the whole app went dead, boom, and then my phone had a black screen. So, you know, I keep turning it over and turning it on. So if you want to join me, you want to follow up from previous builds, I'll have a slight Q&A real quick on IG. Come on over. Hit me up. And again, I love my moderators. I love my people. Don't believe in me. Believe in my belief in you. Salute, salute, salute. Let's get busy.